On a freezing Seattle night, when the rain cut through bone and the city looked the other way, a woman with nothing left made a choice that would change many lives. She heard children crying beneath a dark pier, and found them clinging to a bleeding man and a wounded German shepherd, guarding them with his last strength. She gave them the only warmth she had, and walked back into the cold alone. She thought no one would ever know. She was wrong. What happens next will make you believe in quiet miracles and second chances for the forgotten. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Seattle in January was not the kind of cold that screamed. It whispered. The city lay under a sky the color of wet steel, clouds pressing so low they seemed to rest on the rooftops. Snow fell not in dramatic storms, but in stubborn, soaking sheets, melting into icy rain the moment it touched the ground. The wind off Puget Sound crept through alleyways and under coats, finding skin, finding bone, finding every weakness a human body tried to hide. Emily Carter moved through it with her head down. She was 29 years old, slender to the point of looking fragile, though the tension in her shoulders suggested otherwise. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a low, uneven ponytail, strands escaping and sticking to her pale cheeks as sleet gathered there. Her skin carried the faint grayish tone of someone who rarely saw warmth anymore, not just from the weather, but from life itself. Emily was not beautiful in the way magazines celebrated, but there was something quietly striking about her. Sharp eyes the color of winter leaves, observant and guarded, and a mouth that seemed to have forgotten how to rest in a smile. She wore a navy blue jacket that had once belonged to someone else, the sleeves slightly too long, the insulation thinning at the elbows. Beneath it, layers of worn sweaters clung to her narrow frame. Wrapped around her neck was a faded gray scarf, frayed at the ends. She had knitted it herself years ago, when she still believed effort always led to reward. The ferry terminal loomed behind her, lights flickering as the last workers clocked out. Emily had just finished a 12-hour night shift cleaning offices near the docks. The work was honest, if exhausting. It paid enough to buy groceries and keep her phone service active. It did not pay enough for rent. She walked toward the waterfront, boots splashing through shallow puddles that froze again within minutes. Her breath fogged the air in front of her, steady, controlled. Emily had learned long ago that panic wasted heat. As she passed under the Alaskan Way overpass, the sounds of the city dulled. Traffic faded into a distant hum, the smell of salt water mixed with rust and damp concrete. This stretch of the city was forgotten at night, claimed by shadows and the occasional person who had nowhere else to go. That was when she heard it, a sound that did not belong to the wind, crying. Emily stopped. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. Fatigue had a way of inventing things. She stood still, listening, counting her breaths. The sound came again, thin, broken, unmistakably human, a child's voice, muffled and shaking. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her worn canvas bag. "Don't," she whispered to herself, though she didn't finish the sentence. She followed the sound. Beneath the pier, where wooden beams rose from black water like ribs, she found them. Two children sat huddled together on a piece of flattened cardboard. They were twins, a boy and a girl, no older than 7. Their faces were nearly identical, wide eyes, sharp noses, but exhaustion had carved fear into them in different ways. The boy's jaw was clenched, his thin shoulders squared as if he could shield the world by force of will. The girl leaned into him, her movements slow, her eyelids fluttering as though sleep tugged her downward. They were dressed far too well for where they were. The boy wore a puffy red jacket soaked through, expensive once, now heavy with melting snow. The girl's coat was white, stained gray along the hem, her small hands bare and trembling. Their sneakers were thin, soles slick against frozen ground. Emily's gaze dropped lower. A man lay slumped against one of the pier supports, half conscious, blood darkening the front of his shirt. He was large, broad-shouldered even in his weakened state. His beard, once neatly trimmed, had grown rough, framing a face carved with hard angles and old scars. A jagged cut split his eyebrow, and dried blood traced the line of his temple, one hand pressed weakly against his side, where fresh red seeped through fabric. Beside him lay a German shepherd. The dog was enormous, even curled protectively against the man's legs. His coat was sable and black, thick with ice crystals clinging to the fur. One ear stood alert while the other drooped slightly, torn at the edge. His amber eyes locked onto Emily instantly. A low growl vibrated in his chest, not aggressive, but warning, the kind born of training and loyalty rather than fear. The boy looked up at her. "Please," he said. His voice cracked. "My uncle won't wake up." Emily did not hesitate. She knelt slowly, keeping her movements visible, her palms open. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," she said softly. Her voice was steady, the same tone she once used in hospital wards when patients were afraid. "I just want to help." The German shepherd's growl softened, but did not disappear. His body remained tense, muscles coiled beneath his fur. The man stirred, letting out a shallow groan. His eyelids fluttered open briefly, revealing steel-gray eyes clouded with pain. He tried to speak, failed, and slipped back into unconsciousness. Emily assessed the wound quickly, the angle of the blood, the man's shallow breathing, the way his skin had begun to pale beneath the beard. She didn't have equipment. She didn't have time. She reached for her phone. No signal. Of course. The girl whimpered, her head rolling against her brother's shoulder. "She's so cold," the boy said. "She won't stop shaking." Emily swallowed. The wind cut harder beneath the pier. Water slapped against the beams below, rhythmic and unforgiving. Emily knew hypothermia when she saw it. She also knew what came next if nothing changed. She stood and unzipped her jacket. The boy stared at her. "What are you doing?" Emily shrugged out of the jacket, the cold biting instantly through her layers. She draped it around the children, wrapping it tight around both of them, tucking the edges beneath their arms. "You'll freeze," the boy said. "You need it." Emily smiled faintly. "I run warm," she lied. She unwound the gray scarf from her neck and wrapped it gently around the girl's hands, rubbing them through the fabric to bring back circulation. The German shepherd watched every movement. When Emily reached toward the man's wound, the dog shifted, placing his massive head between her hand and his owner's body. "It's okay," Emily murmured. She met the dog's gaze, unflinching. "I won't hurt him." Something in her voice, quiet, certain, made the dog pause. Slowly, reluctantly, he eased back an inch. Emily pressed her scarf against the man's side, applying pressure. "You're going to be okay," she said, though she wasn't sure who she was speaking to. Sirens sounded in the distance. Emily's shoulders sagged with relief. When flashing lights painted the underside of the pier red and blue, she stepped back. Paramedics rushed in, lifting the man onto a stretcher. One of them crouched in front of the children, speaking softly. "Ma'am," another called to Emily, "are you hurt?" She shook her head. "They need warmth," she said. "Please don't separate them." The German shepherd rose to his feet, limping slightly, but refusing to leave the stretcher's side. As the children were guided toward the ambulance, the boy turned back. "Wait," he said. "What's your name?" Emily hesitated. For a moment, she considered telling the truth. Then she thought of the garage she slept in, the cold concrete floor, the life that didn't leave room for thank yous or follow-ups. "It doesn't matter," she said gently. "Just stay warm." She turned and walked back into the snow before anyone could stop her. Behind her, under the flashing lights, the German shepherd let out a single, low bark, as if memorizing her silhouette. Jack Hayes regained consciousness the way soldiers often did, without panic, without questions, and without relief. His eyes opened slowly beneath the harsh hospital lights, pupils contracting as if bracing for impact. For a moment, he did not move. He listened instead. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, the faint hiss of oxygen, the distant murmur of voices beyond a curtain. He cataloged sensations automatically, the habit of a man who had survived too many moments where awareness meant the difference between life and death. Pain came next, a deep pulsing ache in his side, sharp enough to confirm he was alive. Jack exhaled through his nose, jaw tightening beneath a beard that had gone untrimmed for weeks. He was 38 years old, tall and broad, even lying flat. His build still carrying the dense muscle of a former Navy SEAL, though softened now by fatigue and old injuries that never fully healed. His hair was dark blonde, cut short in a utilitarian style that required no mirror. The lines etched around his eyes were not from age alone, but from years of squinting into sunlit deserts and moonless nights, searching for threats that often came too late. He turned his head slightly. Two small shapes sat curled together in chairs beside his bed. "Eli," he rasped. His voice was dry, unused. The boy startled upright immediately. Eli Hayes, 7 years old, thin but sharp-eyed, was the kind of child who grew serious too early. His sandy hair stuck up at odd angles, and a faint scar ran along his chin, the souvenir of a childhood accident Jack still blamed himself for. Beside him, his twin sister Lily stirred, her light brown curls spilling over her jacket as she blinked sleep from her eyes. Lily's face was softer, her expression slower to form, but there was a quiet resilience in her that Jack had always admired. She had been sick often as a baby, and the memory of her small Binny wrapped in hospital blankets had never fully loosened its grip on him. "You're awake," Eli said quickly, scrambling to his feet. Relief cracked his composure, and for a moment he looked like the child he was. "The doctors said you might not wake up until morning." Jack swallowed. "You both okay?" Lily nodded, climbing down from her chair and pressing close to his side, careful of the wires and bandages. "We were cold," she said simply. "But not anymore." Jack closed his eyes briefly. He remembered fragments, the ambush, the sound of metal striking flesh, the weight of Rex's body against his legs as he went down. And then, nothing. "Where's Rex?" "Whoa," he asked, his eyes snapping open again. As if summoned by name, the curtain shifted. Rex entered the room with the quiet confidence of an animal who had learned when silence mattered. The German Shepherd was older than he looked at first glance, nearly 8 years by Jack's count, his muzzle dusted with gray beneath the black and sable coat. His left hind leg bore a faint limp, the legacy of shrapnel removed years ago in a desert far from Seattle. His ears were asymmetrical, one perfectly erect, the other permanently bent at the tip. His amber eyes, however, were sharp and alert, tracking every movement in the room. Rex approached the bed and placed his massive head gently against Jack's thigh, letting out a low huff that was half sigh, half reprimand. "Hey, buddy," Jack murmured, his hand finding the familiar coarse fur. "You did good." Rex's tail thumped once against the floor. That was all. A woman stepped into view behind him. She was in her early 40s, tall and composed, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun that spoke of long shifts and little patience for inefficiency. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had the posture of someone accustomed to command, shoulders straight, movements precise. Her skin was a warm brown, her expression professional but not unkind. A thin silver chain rested against her scrubs, the only sign of adornment she allowed herself. "You gave us a scare, Mr. Hayes," she said. Her voice was calm, steady. "Internal bleeding, a collapsed lung, hypothermia, you're lucky." Jack met her gaze. "I don't believe in luck." Sarah's mouth curved slightly. "Most people who've seen what you've seen don't." She checked his chart, efficient. "You'll recover, slowly, and you'll stay here long enough to do it properly. Your dog is cleared to stay during visiting hours only. Hospital exception." Jack nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "There's something else about how you got here." Eli straightened. "The lady," he said immediately. "The one who helped us." Jack's attention sharpened. "What lady?" Eli's hands clenched at his sides, as if afraid the memory might slip away. "She found us under the pier. She gave us her coat and a scarf. She said her house was close, but she was lying. I could tell." Lily nodded solemnly. "She was very cold." Jack felt something tighten in his chest, unrelated to his injuries. "Did she stay?" "No," Eli said. "She left before the ambulance took us." Sarah watched Jack carefully. "We didn't get her name, no ID. She refused evaluation." Jack looked down at his children, then at the dog beside him. Rex's ears twitched, his gaze shifting toward the window, toward the city beyond. "She saved them," Jack said quietly. "Find her." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That won't be easy." "I know," Jack replied, "but it's necessary." The search began the next morning. Jack was transferred to a private room overlooking Elliott Bay, the gray water churning restlessly below. His resources moved quietly. Jack Hayes no longer wore a uniform, but years of service had taught him how to build networks that did not ask questions. Security footage from the pier, traffic cameras, shelter intake records, hospital admissions for hypothermia, every possibility was traced backward, then forward again. Rex accompanied the process from the foot of Jack's bed, watching screens with unsettling focus, ears pricked whenever a figure appeared, walking alone through snow. The breakthrough came from a laundromat camera 3 blocks inland. A woman, thin and unsteady, walking into frame without a coat. Jack leaned forward despite the pain. "That's her." The footage showed her collapsing near the entrance, knees buckling before she hit the concrete. Cars passed. People hurried by. No one stopped until an older man with a weathered face and a shopping cart full of cans knelt beside her. "Who's that?" Jack asked. "Name's Frank Dorsey," said the man standing near the monitor. His name was Marcus Reed, Jack's private security coordinator. Marcus was in his late 40s, tall and lean, his black hair shaved close to his scalp. His face bore the permanent seriousness of someone who'd spent his life anticipating problems. A former Army Ranger, Marcus spoke little and observed much. He called an ambulance. She was admitted as a Jane Doe. Jack exhaled slowly. "Where is she now?" "Harborview Medical Center," Marcus replied. "Public ward. Severe hypothermia. She's stable, but barely." Jack closed his eyes. Images of cold water, of bodies pulled from freezing seas, flashed behind his eyelids. "Move her," he said. Marcus hesitated. "She didn't want help." "I know," Jack said, "but I do." Rex let out a soft whine, as if in agreement. By nightfall, Emily Carter lay in a private hospital room, unaware of the chain of decisions unfolding around her. Her breathing was shallow but steady, her face pale against white sheets. The gray scarf lay folded on a nearby chair, its frayed ends carefully smoothed. Jack stood outside the room, watching through the glass. He had faced enemies without flinching. He had watched men die and lived with the weight of it. But the sight of a stranger who had given everything, she had, and nearly paid with her life, left him unsettled, in a way no battlefield ever had. "She didn't have to do that," Marcus said quietly. "No," Jack replied, "but she did." He rested his hand briefly on the glass, feeling the cold seep into his palm. And for the first time in years, Jack Hayes understood that survival alone was not the same as living. Emily Carter woke as if she had been pulled upward through cold water, her breath catching sharply in her throat. Her eyes flew open to a ceiling she did not recognize, smooth, white, uncracked. The light above her was soft, indirect, nothing like the flickering bulbs of the garage she had grown used to. For a few disoriented seconds, she lay still, listening. The steady beep of a monitor, the hum of climate control, the distant roll of wheels in a hallway. Everything about the room felt clean, quiet, and far too expensive. Panic followed clarity. Emily pushed herself upright, or tried to. Her body refused. A wave of weakness crashed through her limbs, leaving her trembling and breathless. She dropped back against the pillows, heart racing. The blankets were warm, too warm. Someone had taken care to tuck them around her shoulders, and the realization unsettled her more than the pain in her chest. Her gaze moved slowly, cataloging details the way she always did when fear threatened to take over. A private hospital room, a leather chair near the window, fresh flowers on a side table, white lilies, still closed, their scent faint but unmistakable. A folded gray scarf lay beside them, neatly arranged, the frayed ends smoothed as if by deliberate hands. My scarf, she thought. Memory rushed in. Snow. Children's faces blue with cold, the weight of a jacket leaving her shoulders. Sirens, then darkness. "No," Emily whispered hoarsely. "No, no, no." Hospital bills. That was the first coherent fear. Bills she could never pay, questions she could never answer. She had learned to avoid systems because systems demanded things. Addresses, insurance cards, family contacts. She had none of those. Emily swung her legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the protest of her muscles. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet, grounding in a way she desperately needed. She reached for the IV line taped to her arm and began fumbling with it, fingers clumsy but determined. "Please don't do that." The voice came from the doorway. Emily froze. A woman stood there, watching her with quiet concern. She was in her mid-50s, average height, with silver threaded through her dark hair, which she wore pulled back in a simple twist. Her face was round and expressive, with deep-set brown eyes that radiated patience. She wore plain slacks and a soft cardigan rather than medical scrubs, and there was something unmistakably domestic about her presence, like a kitchen that smelled of coffee rather than antiseptic. "I can leave," Emily said quickly, her voice strained. "I didn't ask to be here. I don't have money." The woman raised her hands gently, palms outward. "No one is asking you for anything," she said. Her accent carried the faint warmth of the Southwest. "My name is Maria Alvarez. I work for the family who brought you here." Emily's breath hitched. "Family?" Maria stepped closer, careful not to invade space. She had the posture of someone used to calming, frightened people. her movements slow, unthreatening. You were found unconscious from hypothermia? Someone was very worried about you. Emily shook her head. You've made a mistake. Maria smiled softly. I don't think so. Before Emily could respond, another presence filled the doorway. The German shepherd entered first. Rex moved with the deliberate calm of an animal who understood boundaries. His large paws made no sound against the polished floor as he approached, amber eyes fixed on Emily. He looked healthier than before, his coat brushed, a fresh bandage wrapped neatly around his hind leg. He stopped a few feet away and sat, tail resting on the floor, watching her with quiet intensity. Emily's chest tightened. You, she whispered. Rex's ears flicked forward. Behind him stood a man she recognized immediately, even though she had only seen him for seconds beneath the pier. Jack Hayes filled the doorway with his height and broad frame, leaning slightly on a cane he hadn't needed before. His dark blonde hair was still cropped short, his beard trimmed but thick enough to frame a jaw lined with old scars. He wore dark slacks and a gray sweater, simple clothes that couldn't hide the density of muscle beneath them. His steel-gray eyes held her steadily, without accusation, without gratitude, only intent. You shouldn't be trying to leave, Jack said. His voice was low, roughened by injury and something older. Emily's fingers curled into the blanket. I don't belong here. Jack took one step inside, stopping well short of her bed. You saved my niece and nephew, he said. You kept pressure on a wound that would have killed me. You gave them your coat in sub-zero weather. Emily looked away. Anyone would have done the same. Jack did not smile. No, they wouldn't have. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. I didn't do it to be found, Emily said finally. Or thanked. I know, Jack replied. That's why it matters. Maria cleared her throat gently. Dr. Mitchell says you need at least another day of observation. After that, you can decide what you want to do. Emily laughed softly, the sound brittle. Decide? That's generous. Jack watched her carefully, noting the way her shoulders remained tense, as if expecting the ground to disappear beneath her at any moment. You don't owe us anything, he said, but you're not leaving like this. And if I say no? Emily asked, meeting his gaze. Jack considered her question seriously. Then I'll respect it, but not before you're safe. Rex shifted, standing and moving closer. He lowered his head, resting it lightly against the side of the bed. The warmth of him seeped through the thin hospital gown, solid and real. Emily's breath shuddered. She reached out before she could stop herself, her fingers sinking into his fur. He stayed, she murmured. I thought they'd take him away. He doesn't leave my side, Jack said. And apparently he didn't want to leave yours either. Emily swallowed hard. The truth settled slowly, like snow piling on a ledge. She was here because they had chosen to look back, because someone had decided her life was worth the trouble. That realization terrified her more than the cold ever had. Later that evening, after Maria left and Rex lay dozing near the window, Emily stared out at the city lights reflecting off the bay. Jack sat in the chair nearby, silent, respectful of space. He spoke only when she did. What happens now? She asked quietly. Jack leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. You get better. After that, you decide. I can offer you a place to stay temporarily. No contracts, no strings. Emily closed her eyes. I don't take charity. Jack nodded once. Then don't call it that. She studied his face, the exhaustion, behind his control, the restraint honed by loss. Why? Jack hesitated, the first crack in his composure. Because if you hadn't stopped that night, my family would be broken, and I've had enough of that. Emily looked back out at the water, at a city she had learned to survive but never belonged to. For the first time in years, she didn't know where she would go next, and that uncertainty felt heavier than hunger. Emily Carter left the hospital 2 days later with a small paper bag of belongings and a knot in her chest she could not untangle. The city greeted her the same way it always did. Gray sky pressed low, rain misting sideways, the smell of salt and metal drifting in from the bay. Seattle did not celebrate survival. It simply continued. Jack Hayes waited by the curb beside a dark SUV, Rex seated patiently at his heel. Jack moved slower than before, his cane striking the pavement with a muted rhythm, but his posture remained upright, disciplined. The coat he wore was simple, charcoal wool, cut cleanly along his shoulders. His beard was trimmed again, revealing the sharp geometry of his face. Strong cheekbones, a straight nose slightly bent from an old break, eyes that watched the world, as if expecting it to misbehave. Emily paused when she saw him. "You don't have to do this," she said. Jack met her gaze. "Neither did you." He opened the passenger door without another word. The drive took them north, away from the dense spine of downtown and into neighborhoods where trees leaned over narrow roads, their bare branches dripping rain. Emily watched the city change through the window. Glass towers gave way to weathered houses and quiet streets. The silence inside the car was not awkward. Rex lay stretched across the back seat, his breathing slow and even, the steady presence of something dependable. Jack's home stood at the edge of a wooded rise overlooking the water. It was not large, but it was solid. Cedar siding darkened by years of rain, a wide porch wrapped around the front, windows glowing softly despite the daylight. The house felt anchored, as if it had grown there rather than been built. Emily hesitated at the steps. "I'll stay a night," she said. "That's all." Jack nodded. "That's enough." Inside, warmth settled around her immediately. Not the sharp heat of a heater turned too high, but the consistent lived-in warmth of a place that expected people to stay. The air smelled faintly of coffee and wood polish. Shoes lined neatly by the door. A coat rack held jackets that looked worn but cared for. Maria Alvarez appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. She smiled when she saw Emily, the kind of smile that did not demand anything in return. "You made it," she said. "I'll show you your room." Emily followed her down a hallway lined with framed photographs. None of them were grand. Jack with the children on a beach, all three squinting into sun. Jack and a woman Emily didn't recognize, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, laughing mid-sentence. The photo was older, edges softened by time. Emily looked away quickly, instinctively respectful of grief she did not yet understand. The guest room was modest, a bed with a quilt folded neatly at the foot, a small dresser, a window facing the trees, nothing expensive, everything intentional. "If you need anything," Maria said, lingering at the door, "just ask." Emily nodded, unsure what to say. That evening she sat at the kitchen table while Jack prepared a simple meal. He moved with the efficiency of someone used to cooking out of necessity rather than pleasure. No wasted gestures, no unnecessary tools. He did not ask her questions. He did not explain himself. He placed a bowl of soup in front of her and went back to the stove. Emily ate slowly, the warmth spreading through her in waves she hadn't felt in a long time. Rex lay near her chair, chin on his paws, eyes half-lidded but alert. When she finished, she reached down and scratched behind his ears. His tail thumped once against the floor. Later, as night settled in, Emily wandered onto the porch. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the water below reflected the scattered lights of distant boats. She wrapped her arms around herself, the old habit returning without permission. Jack joined her a moment later, carrying 2 mugs. He handed one to her. "Tea," he said. "No caffeine." She accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. His hand was warm, calloused. "Thank you," she said, then surprised herself by adding, "for not asking." Jack leaned against the railing. People explain themselves when they're afraid of being misunderstood. Emily watched the steam rise from her mug. "I don't stay places long." "I know," Jack said. "This doesn't have to be one." The days that followed unfolded quietly. Emily expected tension, rules, conditions. None came. Jack left early in the mornings for physical therapy and meetings he did not talk about. Maria went about her routines with gentle efficiency. The children, Eli and Lily, visited after school, their curiosity restrained by something close to reverence. They did not cling, they did not demand. They watched Emily as if she were something fragile and extraordinary at the same time. On the third afternoon, Emily followed Rex into the backyard. The ground was damp, the grass thick and uneven. Beyond the fence stood a small, migging barn she hadn't noticed before. Its doors were weathered, paint peeling, but the structure stood firm. "What's that?" she asked. Jack, watching from the porch, hesitated. A reminder. He opened the barn door. Inside stood a horse. The mare lifted her head slowly, dark eyes calm, intelligent. She was tall and lean, her coat a deep chestnut streaked with silver along her mane. Age showed in the slight sway of her back and the scars along her legs, thin white lines, old and healed. She stood with a quiet dignity, the kind born of patience rather than strength. "This is Maple," Jack said. "She's 22. Emily stepped closer, cautious. Maple did not move away. She breathed out softly, warm air fogging the cool space between them. She was used for mounted patrol work overseas, Jack continued. Retired early after an explosion, same as me. Emily reached out, letting Maple sniff her hand before touching her neck. The horse's skin twitched beneath her fingers, alive and responsive. She's gentle, Emily said. She wasn't always, Jack replied. But she learned. That night, Emily dreamed of open fields and steady ground. The tension broke a week later. A man appeared at the gate one afternoon while Emily was brushing Maple. He was tall, lean to the point of sharpness, with close-cropped black hair and eyes that scanned rather than saw. His jacket was expensive, his posture alert. Marcus Reed. He spoke to Jack quietly, urgency threading his voice. Emily did not hear the words, but she saw the shift in Jack's shoulders, the tightening of his jaw. Later, Jack found her in the barn. "There are people from my past," he said. "They've started asking questions." Emily stilled. "About me?" "Yes." She set the brush down carefully. "Then I should go." Jack shook his head. "Running won't protect you. It never does." Emily met his gaze, the old instinct screaming to flee. "This is exactly why I don't stay." Jack stepped closer, not crowding her. "This is why you should." Rex appeared in the doorway, watching both of them, ears forward. Emily looked around, the barn, the horse, the house beyond. A place that did not ask who she had been or where she would go next. A place that did not demand proof of worth. She exhaled slowly. "One night at a time," she said. Jack nodded. "That's how most battles are won." Morning arrived quietly at Jack Hayes's house. The kind of morning that did not announce itself with sunlight, but with subtle changes in sound. Rain tapped softly against the roof. The wind moved through the trees with restraint, as if even it were reluctant to disturb the fragile calm that had settled over the place. Emily Carter woke before anyone else, as she always did, her body conditioned by years of sleeping lightly, ready to move at the first sign of trouble. For several seconds, she lay still, listening. No sirens, no shouting, no sudden footsteps. Only the steady rhythm of the house breathing around her. The realization that she was safe, at least for now, did not bring comfort the way she expected. Instead, it pressed on her chest with unfamiliar weight. Safety, she had learned, came with expectations. It asked questions. It required decisions. And decisions were dangerous things. She rose quietly and dressed in the borrowed clothes Maria had left folded on the chair the night before. Simple jeans, a soft sweater, socks thick enough to make her feet feel grounded again. The fabric smelled faintly of clean cotton and something warmer, home, perhaps. Emily tried not to think too hard about that. Downstairs, Rex was already awake. The German shepherd lay near the kitchen doorway, his body stretched out but alert, head lifting the moment he sensed her presence. In the pale morning light, his age showed more clearly, the graying fur around his muzzle, the stiffness in the way he rose to his feet, the slight hesitation before placing weight on his injured leg. Still, his presence filled the space, solid and reassuring. "Morning," Emily whispered. Rex's tail swayed once, slow and deliberate. He followed her outside without being called. The backyard smelled of damp earth and pine needles. Emily pulled her sweater tighter around herself and crossed toward the barn, drawn by a sense of unfinished conversation. Maple stood inside, already awake, her dark eyes calm as Emily approached. The horse's ears flicked forward, recognizing her. Emily rested her forehead briefly against Maple's neck, breathing in the warm, grassy scent that clung to her coat. "I stayed," Emily murmured, more to herself than to the horse. Maple shifted her weight, steady, unjudging. Later that morning, the house came to life. Maria moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. Eli and Lily arrived shortly after, shedding jackets and boots with the relief of children who felt unburdened here. Eli, all sharp angles and restless energy, hovered near Emily with obvious curiosity. Lily lingered closer, her presence quiet but constant. Jack appeared last. He looked more tired than the day before. The lines at the corners of his eyes were deeper, his movements careful as he lowered himself into a chair. The cane leaned against the table within easy reach. He greeted the children with a gentle nod, exchanged a few quiet words with Maria, and then his gaze settled briefly on Emily. "You didn't leave," he said. Emily shrugged. "Not yet." Jack accepted that without comment. The morning passed with a rhythm Emily found herself slipping into despite resistance. She helped Lily with homework at the kitchen table, her voice patient, guiding rather than correcting. Eli asked endless questions about the barn, about Rex, about whether Maple had ever been scared. Emily answered what she could, deflecting when the questions turned toward her. Jack watched from a distance, unnoticed or pretending to be. He noted the way Emily knelt to the children's level, how she listened without interrupting, how her presence seemed to anchor the room. It unsettled him more than any threat ever had. The call came just after noon. Jack stepped outside to take it, his voice low, controlled. Emily watched through the window as his posture shifted, shoulders tightening, jaw setting. When he returned, the warmth he carried with him had cooled. "Marcus?" Emily asked quietly. Jack nodded. He confirmed it. Confirmed what? That the people asking questions aren't just curious. Emily felt the familiar pull in her gut, the instinct to pack and disappear. "Then this is where I get out of the way." Jack studied her carefully. "They don't know who you are. Not yet." "That's worse," Emily said. "That means they'll find out." Jack did not argue. "Which is why I won't let you be alone." The words settled between them, heavier than he seemed to intend. That afternoon, Marcus Reed arrived in person. He carried himself like a man who had never fully left the battlefield. Back straight, movements economical, eyes constantly assessing exits. In daylight, his features were sharper than Emily remembered from the brief glimpse before. A narrow face with high cheekbones, a scar cutting through his right eyebrow, lips pressed into a neutral line that rarely softened. His clothes were plain, functional, chosen to blend rather than impress. Marcus acknowledged Emily with a brief nod. "Ma'am?" She returned it cautiously. "They're former contractors," Marcus said to Jack as they stood in the living room. "Private security types. One of them was involved in the same operation that went sideways overseas." Emily's stomach tightened. She did not need details to understand the implications. Jack's voice was steady. "Are they a direct threat?" "Not yet," Marcus replied, "but they're testing boundaries, seeing what you protect." Emily folded her arms. "Then I'm a liability." Jack turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "You're a person." Marcus's gaze flicked between them, sharp, calculating. He said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. That evening, tension threaded through the house. The children sensed it, their laughter quieter, their movements more restrained. Maria served dinner, without comment, her calm presence a deliberate counterweight. Rex remained close to Emily, positioning himself instinctively between her and open spaces. After the children were asleep, Emily found Jack in the barn. He stood beside Maple's stall, one hand resting on the rough wood, his head bowed slightly. The dim light cast shadows along his face, emphasizing the scars and angles. The quiet damage time had etched there. "You should have told me sooner," Emily said. Jack did not look up. "I wanted you to choose to stay without fear influencing you." Emily leaned against a post, exhaustion finally catching up. "I've lived my entire life with fear," she said softly. "The difference is whether it's honest." Jack turned then, meeting her eyes. "I won't lie to you." She nodded slowly. "Then listen. I don't need protection, I need clarity." Jack considered her words carefully. "Staying here will complicate things. And leaving won't simplify them," Emily replied. "It'll just make me invisible again." Silence followed, thick and thoughtful. Rex shifted closer, pressing his shoulder lightly against Emily's leg. She rested her hand on his head without thinking. Jack exhaled. "I don't know how to keep people safe without controlling the situation." Emily met his gaze steadily. "I don't know how to stay without feeling like I'm in the way." The truth of it settled between them, unadorned. They returned to the house without resolution, but with something else in its place: understanding. That night, Emily lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, leaving the world hushed and waiting. She thought of the garage she used to sleep in, the cold concrete, the constant readiness to flee. She thought of the children's quiet trust, of Maria's unasked kindness, of Rex's steady presence. Staying, she realized, was harder than leaving had ever been, but it was also the first thing that felt like a choice. Down the hall, Jack sat awake as well, listening to the same silence, carrying the same weight. He understood now that protecting Emily would mean more than shielding her from danger. It would mean allowing her to stand beside him, not behind him. And that, somehow, felt like the greater risk. The first sign that something was wrong came as a change in sound. Emily noticed it because she had learned, over years of sleeping lightly, to hear absence as clearly as noise. The wind that usually threaded through the trees had gone still. The rain had stopped without warning. Even the distant hum of traffic seemed to have pulled back, leaving the house wrapped in a hush that felt deliberate. It was close to midnight when she rose from bed. She moved barefoot down the hallway, careful to avoid the one loose board near the stairs. The house was dim, lit only by the small lamps Jack left on at night for the children. As she reached the living room, Rex lifted his head from the rug, his ears angled forward, his body tensing before he stood. A low sound vibrated in his chest, not a growl yet, but the warning that came before it. Emily felt the hair on her arms lift. "What is it?" she whispered. Rex did not look at her. His gaze was fixed on the darkened windows, amber eyes, sharp and unblinking. Emily followed his line of sight and saw nothing at first. Then she noticed it, the faint reflection where none should be, a subtle distortion in the glass near the back of the property, as if someone had moved and then frozen. Rex moved, silent despite his size, positioning himself between Emily and the hall that led to the children's rooms. His age showed in the stiffness of his joints, but his training overrode it. He was no longer a pet in that moment. He was a sentinel. Emily's heart hammered. She did not run. She crossed the room slowly and picked up the phone Jack had insisted she keep nearby. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Before she could press anything, the back door handle shifted, just once. Rex growled then, deep and unmistakable. The sound was enough. Footsteps retreated. Gravel crunched softly outside, moving away from the house rather than toward it. Jack was awake before Emily reached the stairs. He emerged from the hallway already dressed, cane abandoned, a compact pistol held low and steady in his hand. The years of pain and injury fell away from his posture in an instant. His shoulders squared, his movements precise. He took in the scene, Emily pale but standing, Rex alert, the back door intact, and understood without a word. "Kids?" he asked quietly. "Asleep," Emily said. Rex didn't let anything past. Jack nodded once. He moved to the window, scanning the tree line with practiced patience. After a long minute, he exhaled slowly. "They were testing response time," he said, "not trying to get in." Emily crossed her arms tightly. "You were right. Running wouldn't have helped." Jack glanced at her. "You didn't freeze." She surprised herself with a short laugh. "I've been freezing for years." They did not call the police. Jack called Marcus. Marcus arrived before dawn, headlights cutting briefly through the mist before disappearing behind the trees. He stepped out of his vehicle, already assessing, his coat zipped high against the cold. Up close, the fatigue beneath his composure was more apparent. The scar through his eyebrow pulled taut when he frowned, and the faint stubble along his jaw suggested he hadn't slept much either. "They didn't cross the fence," Marcus reported after a perimeter check. "Professional enough to know when not to push." Emily stood on the porch beside Jack, wrapped in a blanket Maria's had draped around her shoulders. "So, what now?" Marcus studied her for a moment, not unkindly, but with the scrutiny of a man whose life had taught him to evaluate risk. "Now, we stop waiting." Later that morning, Jack gathered everyone at the kitchen table. The children sat quietly, sensing the gravity in the room. Maria poured coffee and stayed, her presence a quiet anchor. "I need to explain something," Jack said, his voice steady. "There was an operation overseas. It went bad. Contractors crossed lines they shouldn't have. People died." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Some of those people believe I'm responsible." Emily listened without interrupting. The truth when it came was not dramatic. It was controlled, deliberate, shaped by years of discipline. That made it heavier. "And you think they'll come back?" Emily said. "They will," Jack replied. "But not the way they did tonight." The decision was made quickly. The children would stay with Maria's sister in Tacoma for a few days. Security would rotate, Marcus would remain on site, and Emily would not be sent away. That surprised her. "I can disappear," she offered quietly. "I'm good at it." Jack met her gaze. "That's exactly why you won't." The afternoon brought preparation rather than panic. Marcus coordinated with a small team Jack trusted, men and women who arrived one by one, blending into the property as if they belonged there. One of them was Claire Donovan, a woman in her early 30s with cropped auburn hair and an athletic build. Her expression was calm, her eyes sharp, movements efficient. Former intelligence analyst, Emily would later learn. Claire acknowledged Emily with a nod. No curiosity, no judgment. Another was Ben Holloway, older, broad-chested, with a thick gray beard and hands scarred from decades of field work. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried quiet authority. His presence made the house feel steadier. As evening fell, Emily found herself in the barn again, brushing Maple with slow, deliberate strokes. Rex lay nearby, watching the door. The horse stood patiently, her breathing even. "They're preparing for a fight," Emily said softly. Jack leaned against the stall door. "They're preparing to prevent one." She set the brush down. "I don't want to be a reason someone gets hurt." Jack stepped closer. "You're not the reason. You're the line." Emily looked at him, searching his face for certainty. She found resolve. Instead, hard-earned, unromantic, and unyielding. Night returned, heavier than before. The second intrusion came just after 2 in the morning. This time, there was no hesitation. Motion sensors tripped near the far fence. A shadow moved too fast to be coincidence. Rex was on his feet instantly, a sharp bark cutting through the quiet. Emily was awake before the sound reached her ears, heart racing, but mind clear. She moved to the hallway, as Jack did the same, their paths converging without panic. "Stay behind me," Jack said. Emily shook her head. "Not this time." Before he could argue, a figure vaulted the fence. Ben intercepted first, his silhouette steady, voice commanding. "Stop!" The intruder froze, then bolted. Claire moved with him, faster than Emily expected, cutting off escape routes with precise coordination. The figure stumbled, fell, and was pinned within seconds. When the porch light flicked on, Emily saw him clearly. A man in his 40s, lean, sharp-featured, eyes wild with calculation rather than fear. His beard was patchy, unkempt, his clothes practical but worn. He said nothing as he was restrained. His silence spoke of experience. "It's over," Marcus said quietly as authorities arrived. This time, discreet and prearranged. By dawn, the house was still again. Emily sat on the steps with Rex's head resting against her thigh. The dog's breathing was slow, steady, grounding. Her hands trembled now that the danger had passed. Jack joined her, lowering himself carefully beside her. He did not speak at first. "I didn't run," Emily said finally. "No," Jack replied. "You stood." She closed her eyes. "I don't know what that makes me." Jack looked out at the trees, the sky beginning to lighten. "It makes you someone who chooses." Emily leaned back against the post, exhaustion washing over her. For the first time since the pier, she allowed herself to believe that staying was not weakness. It was resolve. The days following the intrusion unfolded in a strange, muted rhythm, as if the house itself were recovering from a held breath. The security team remained, but they moved with less urgency now, their vigilance quiet rather than sharp. The fence had been reinforced, sensors recalibrated. The threat, Marcus assured them, had been disrupted enough to buy time. Time, Emily learned, was a complicated gift. The children returned from Tacoma 3 days later, their arrival announced by the thud of backpacks and the sudden return of laughter that filled the rooms like sunlight breaking through clouds. Eli burst through the door first, taller somehow, his energy barely contained. Lily followed more carefully, eyes scanning until they found Emily. She crossed the room without hesitation and wrapped her arms around Emily's waist, pressing her cheek into her sweater. "You stayed," Lily said, not a question, but a statement of fact. Emily swallowed. "I did." Jack watched the exchange. From the doorway, his expression unreadable. Rex stood at his side, tail wagging slowly. His body language relaxed for the first time in days. Maple lifted her head from the pasture beyond the fence, ears flicking toward the sound of voices, as if reassured by their return. That evening, after the children were asleep, Jack and Emily sat at opposite ends of the porch, the space between them filled with unspoken aftermath. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap. Crickets had begun to test the edges of summer, their tentative chirps threading through the quiet. "You could have left," Jack said finally. Emily nodded. "I know." "And you didn't." She wrapped her hands around her mug, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. "I spent a long time believing that staying was how you got hurt, that if you didn't put roots down, nothing could pull you apart." Jack leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly beneath his weight. "I spent a long time believing the opposite, that if you didn't control everything, it would fall apart anyway." Emily glanced at him. In the dim porch light, his face looked older, the sharp lines softened by fatigue rather than time. His beard had grown slightly uneven again, silver threading through the darker hair along his jaw. The man who had once moved through the world with certainty now carried himself with careful deliberation, as if each choice mattered more than it used to. "What happened overseas?" Emily said quietly. "It didn't just injure you, it froze you in place." Jack did not deny it. "I came back knowing how to survive. I forgot how to live." The following morning brought a change Emily hadn't expected. Jack invited her to accompany him into the city. "We're not hiding anymore," he said simply. They drove downtown under a pale sky, Rex in the back seat, watching the world pass with steady attention. Emily's chest tightened as familiar streets came into view, the underpass, the ferry terminal, the laundromat where everything had nearly ended. The city felt smaller than she remembered, less menacing. Jack parked near the water and turned off the engine. "I have a meeting. You don't have to come." Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "I will." The building was unassuming, a converted warehouse near the docks. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and old paper. Jack led her into a conference room where 3 people waited. The first was an older woman with short gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Her posture was straight, her gaze direct but kind. "Evelyn Moore," she introduced herself, "legal counsel." Beside her sat a man in his early 40s, with a shaved head and a neatly trimmed beard, his suit tailored but understated. "Daniel Park," he said, extending a hand to Emily. His grip was firm, respectful. "Operations." The third was younger, late 20s perhaps, with dark skin and an easy smile that contrasted with the tension in the room. "Naomi Brooks," she said, "Community Outreach." Jack took his seat. "We're here to talk about what comes next." Emily listened as the conversation unfolded. Not about retaliation, not about fear, but about accountability, boundaries, and closure. About documenting what had happened overseas. About dismantling the remnants of contracts that had bled into something darker. "This isn't justice," Jack said at one point, "but it's responsibility." Emily realized then that Jack wasn't just protecting his home. He was confronting the part of his past he had tried to lock away. After the meeting, they walked along the pier. Gulls cried overhead, the sound sharp and alive. Emily stopped near the spot where she had first heard the children's cries, the memory settling around her like a ghost that no longer frightened her. "I used to think this place marked the end," she said. "Now it feels like a beginning." Jack stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "It can be both." The shift in their dynamic came quietly. It was not a confession or a dramatic declaration. It was in the way Jack reached for a plate when Emily cooked, without being asked. In the way Emily began to sit beside him, rather than across the room. In the way Rex positioned himself between them at night, content and watchful, as if guarding something fragile and new. One afternoon, Emily found Jack in the barn, sitting on an overturned crate, his shoulders slumped. Maple stood nearby, her presence steady, breathing slow. "I can't do this halfway anymore," Jack said without looking up. "Not with them, not with you." Emily leaned against the stall door. "Neither can I." He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her not as someone to protect, but someone choosing to stand. "Staying means things will hurt." She nodded. "Leaving always did." The decision came that night, simple and terrifying. Emily would stop drifting, not immediately, not all at once, but intentionally. She began by filling out forms Maria brought home from the community clinic. She scheduled an appointment. She asked Naomi about training programs. Small steps, each one a quiet rebellion against the life she had survived. Jack watched, offering support without pressure. When she faltered, he did not rush in to steady her. He waited. On the final night of the chapter's turning point, Emily sat with Jack on the porch again, Rex's head resting on her feet, Maple visible in the moonlit pasture beyond. "What if I fail?" Emily asked. Jack considered the question carefully. "Then you won't fail alone." She looked at him, really looked, and understood that the man beside her was no longer hiding behind preparation and control. He was present, and presence, Emily realized, was the bravest thing either of them had learned to offer. The house settled around them, no longer a refuge from the world, but a place within it, and for the first time, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future that did not require escape. Spring did not arrive in Seattle all at once. It came in increments so small they were easy to miss. A lighter shade of gray in the mornings, a stretch of sunlight that lingered an extra minute on the porch, the smell of damp earth giving way to something green and expectant. The house changed with it. Windows were opened more often. Shoes were left by the door without careful alignment. Laughter traveled farther, stayed longer. Emily noticed the changes because she was learning how to notice things without bracing for loss. Her days found a new rhythm. She rose early, not from vigilance but habit, and brewed coffee strong enough to announce itself to the whole house. She walked Rex before breakfast along the edge of the property, his gait steadier now, his muzzle grayer than before, but his eyes still bright. He was 9 this year, old for a working dog, Jack said, but Rex carried his years with the dignity of something that had earned rest. When they returned, Maple would lift her head from the pasture, ears swiveling as if greeting them home. Emily had begun volunteering at the community clinic downtown twice a week. Naomi Brooks had made the introduction, her easy confidence smoothing the way. The clinic director, Thomas Keller, was a compact man in his 50s, with a soft voice and perpetually tired eyes. He wore wireframe glasses and favored sweaters with frayed cuffs. Years earlier, a car accident had ended his career as an emergency physician. The injury left him with a permanent limp and an unshakable patience. He had listened to Emily's story without interruption, then nodded once. "Experience isn't only what's on paper," he had said. "It's what stays with you." Emily started small, intake forms, patient guidance, listening. The work grounded her. It reminded her that she knew how to help without disappearing. Jack watched the shift with careful distance, offering rides when asked, silence when not. His own days had changed as well. Physical therapy sessions grew less frequent. Meetings with Evelyn and Daniel tapered off as legal matters found their resolution. The weight he had carried began to redistribute itself, settling into something manageable rather than consuming. The children flourished. Eli brought home a model bridge he had built at school, insisting on showing Emily every detail. Lily took to Maple with gentle reverence, brushing the horse's mane while whispering stories only they could hear. At night, both children drifted to sleep more easily, their nightmares losing their grip as days stacked gently atop one another. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the pasture in amber light, Jack stood beside Emily at the fence. "You've changed this place," he said. Emily shook her head. "It was already here." "Not like this," Jack replied. "Not open." She considered that. "I think places are like people," she said. "They become what you let them hold." The moment that marked the quiet turning point came without ceremony. It was a Saturday afternoon, warm enough to pull chairs onto the porch. Rex lay sprawled at Emily's feet, snoring softly. Maple grazed beyond the fence. The children were inside, arguing amicably over a board game. Jack returned from the city, carrying a long, narrow box. "I found something," he said. Emily raised an eyebrow. "That's never ominous." He smiled, a small thing, but genuine, and handed her the box. Inside lay a stethoscope, not new, but well kept, the metal warm from the sun. Attached was a simple note in Jack's careful handwriting, "For when you're ready." Emily's throat tightened. She traced the curve of the earpieces with her fingers. "I don't know if I am." Jack met her gaze steadily. "You don't have to know now." She nodded, swallowing emotion. "Thank you." That night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into its familiar hush, Emily and Jack sat on the porch, steps. The air was mild, the sky clear enough to show a scattering of stars. Rex rested between them, a solid presence anchoring the space. "I used to think a future was something you earned all at once," Emily said quietly. "Like a prize." Jack leaned back, stretching his injured leg carefully. "I used to think it was something you defended." She glanced at him. "What do you think now?" "That it's something you build," he said. "Slowly, with room for mistakes." Emily smiled. "I'm good at those." "So am I," Jack replied. The decision they had been circling finally found its words. Emily would stay, not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as part of the household she had helped shape. There were no grand declarations, no promises written in stone, just an understanding that grew stronger each time it was tested. Weeks later, the house hosted its first open gathering. Naomi brought colleagues from the clinic. Thomas Keller arrived with a pie he claimed he had baked himself, though Maria later suspected otherwise. Marcus stopped by briefly, satisfied with the calm he observed. Claire and Ben sent their regards from assignments elsewhere. The children darted through the yard, laughter ringing out without restraint. At the center of it all stood Emily, watching the pieces align. Jack joined her near the fence, handing her a glass of lemonade. "You okay?" She nodded. "I didn't know this was possible." Jack followed her gaze. To the house, the people, the animals, the life unfolding without urgency. "Neither did I." As evening settled, Rex rose and ambled toward the gate, pausing to look back at them, as if reminding them of something important. Emily smiled. "He's telling us it's time." "For what?" Jack asked. "For trusting this," she said. "For letting it be enough." Jack took her hand then, not dramatic, not hurried, just a steady, deliberate choice. She squeezed back, feeling that the quiet strength in his grip. In the pasture, Maple lifted her head, ears forward, a silhouette against the fading light. The house glowed warmly behind them. Somewhere inside, the children laughed again. Emily breathed in, deep and unguarded. The future, she realized, did not need to be chased or feared. It had taken shape around them, patient and unassuming, waiting for them to notice. And this time, she did. Sometimes, miracles do not come with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes, they come quietly. Through a woman who stops when everyone else keeps walking. Through a wounded dog who refuses to leave his human. Through children who survive because someone chose love over fear. Maybe that was God's hand, not forcing the world to change, but whispering to one heart at the exact moment it mattered most. In our daily lives, we may never face a night as cold or a choice as heavy. But every day, God places small moments in front of us. A chance to be kind, a chance to protect, a chance to stay when leaving would be easier. And those moments, those are where quiet miracles are born. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what this story made you feel. Your words may be the light someone else is waiting for. And if you believe that no child, no animal, and no broken soul should ever face fear alone, please subscribe to our channel so we can continue sharing stories that heal. May God bless you wherever you are watching from. May He protect your family, warm your heart, and remind you that even in the darkest nights, His love is never far away. Thank you for being here, and may peace walk with you today and always.